Extensive human engineering helps preserve Niagara Falls. The general rule of natural wonder stewardship is to leave nature alone. We set aside nature preserves, fence off geysers, and stop people from altering the land. In the case of Niagara Falls, however, a little intervention is required to keep all that rushing water. The very thing that specific human engineering projects were implemented to preserve Niagara Falls. The combined falls, Horseshoe, American, and Bridal Veil, located on the Niagara River, which drains Lake Erie into Lake Ontario, form the highest flow rate of any waterfall in the world. During peak flow, 225,000 cubic feet of water can cascade over the falls each second, although the yearly average is 85,000 cubic feet per second. Historically, the high rate of water flow led to an erosion of approximately 3 feet per year. Engineering projects intended to both harness the huge amount of water for hydroelectric projects and to preserve the falls have reduced the yearly erosion rate to only 1 foot per year. Still, even with human intervention, the current rate of erosion means that 50,000 years from now the erosion will have completely worn the rock back all 20 miles to Lake Erie, and the falls will cease to exist, replaced instead with a canyon carved down through the surrounding rock. Niagara Falls consists of 3 magnificent waterfalls spanning the border of Ontario and New York. The 164-foot-tall Horseshoe Falls is on the Canadian side, while Bridal Veil and American Falls are on the New York side. These picturesque falls combined have the highest flow rate in North America. There are many ways to enjoy the falls, including going on hiking trails and boardwalks at the base or visiting viewpoints at the top of the falls. The popular way to get up close to the falls is to hop on the Maid of the Mist boat tour from the bottom of Niagara Gorge. Niagara Falls is a marvel. If you've ever stood at Table Rock on the Canadian side of Niagara Falls, watching the water thunder past and feeling the mist on your face, you might have been tempted to imagine what this natural wonder must have looked like hundreds of years ago, before the casinos, hotels, and haunted houses moved in. The truth? Pretty different. Since the late 19th century, the falls have been heavily engineered to generate energy behind a flowing facade, designed to appeal to the estimated 13 million tourists who visit each year. Essentially, this natural wonder is now a tap. Huge tunnels channel the waters of the Niagara River around the falls, which ebb and flow according to the tourism calendar. Before the Second World War, engineers had envisioned a series of submerged weirs as well as various configurations of control dams. But the models now indicated that these would not be flexible enough to meet the treaty's flow parameters. A control structure with gates, what some might term a dam, which could maintain the pool level for power diversions while also distributing the flow to cataracts in a satisfactory way, emerged as the backbone of a new water control regime, along with fills and excavations to reconfigure the riverbed and lip of the cataract. The 1949 Federal Power Commission report on Niagara development had placed this control structure near the outlet of Lake Erie at Buffalo, some 18 miles upstream. But engineers now believed that the optimal location was right above the falls. In addition to a control structure, the remedial works would include reclaiming the flanks of the falls so that no unsightly trickles would be obvious, and a greater volume of water could be channeled to the shortened crest of the falls. These fringes would be reclaimed and landscaped to serve as viewing areas. This speaks to the hybridity inherent in the design. Organic elements were accommodated and factored into their mechanical creation, incorporated as part of the dynamic infrastructure, i.e., the new enviro-technical system engineers were creating would not work properly without normal weed growth and ice formation. Designing remedial works and power station intakes to withstand or deal with ice, particularly fragile ice, was a paramount concern. Informative studies of the impact of ice formation had been done in the Niagara River over the previous century, and many of the engineers from Ontario Hydro and the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers were on the leading edge of ice studies. There was still a dearth of factual data about ice, however. Whereas a controlling criterion in the studies underpinning the 1929 Niagara Convention and Protocol was a satisfactory depth of water in the high-flow section of the Horseshoe Falls to create a satisfactory color effect. Now complete coverage of the flanks was equally important. But what was the acceptable minimum depth and distribution? Several aspects had changed. After all, since 1929, there was the submerged weir, and additional diversions had been authorized in the 1940s. The engineers agreed that an attempt would be made to establish a scenically satisfactory flow per foot over the flanks in advance of the tests, to present a target at which the tests would aim. Engineers simulated dikes and barrages in the cascades above the Horseshoe to deflect water to the edges, 11 different model designs in all, and then they tried with fills and excavations. The latter was ultimately recommended since they were more aesthetically pleasing, no more expensive, and less susceptible to ice damage. But the precise placement and size of fills and cuts needed further tests. For example, lesser amounts of excavation at the flanks could produce an unbroken crestline on the model, with the river flow at 100,000 CFS, but not at 50,000 CFS. International control structure is under construction. While a control structure had emerged as the preferred method in place of weirs, what should its dimensions and features be? The engineers went to the model to test the different options: a dam across the entire river, or only part of it. Or another dam at the head of the river by Buffalo? Should a control dam have sluices or movable gates so that water flows to certain sides of the river could be better controlled, and to deal with ice? The models were used to progressively eliminate the less suitable solutions. The control structure would be most useful on the Canadian side of the river since the riverbed slanted in that direction. The proposal for a short dam from the American shore to join a longer structure from the Canadian shore, with a gap in between, was rejected because the costs would be out of proportion to the resulting benefits. Settling on a control dam extending from the western shore, experiments indicated that it needed to be a minimum of 1,550 feet long and feature 13 gates/sluices. The 1950 Niagara Diversion Treaty authorized this altered water regime, as well as the remedial works that would compensate for this loss of flow. The remedial works were designed to produce continuity along the rim, an uninterrupted curtain of water with a sufficient impression of volume and an appropriate shade of watercolor. They were also intended to reduce spray and mist, which the parks commissioners were sure discouraged visitors. The official history of Canadian Niagara Parks claims that the spray problems were reduced, at least at the scenic tunnels. While it was debatable whether the mist and spray had dissipated near the falls, and whether erosion had been curtailed to the extent claimed, the waterfall was taller and cloaked by a liquid veil. Parts of both reclaimed flanks of the Horseshoe Falls were landscaped, walled, or railed, and turned into prime vantage points. The public flocked to these viewing stations. This all spoke to the commodification of the Niagara experience. Nature was simplified and ordered, sanitized, tamed, and packaged for convenient consumption. Niagara Falls still involves a huge volume of plummeting water. Granted, it could now be turned on and off, or at least up and down, like a tap, or like workers punching in and out of their shifts. Time itself was further reconfigured with the creation of the pumped storage plants that hoarded the water. according to the needs of the generating stations rather than nature's clock. The manipulation of Niagara Falls raises interesting questions about the supposed divide between natural and artificial, between human and non-human.